The transfer of the Varkaan offspring to human care was nothing short of monumental. For the Varkaan, this was a moment of profound vulnerability. Their species had never known trust, not in the way humans defined it. Yet here they stood, their towering forms silent and tense as their delicate young were placed into human hands. For a species that saw emotion as weakness, their struggle to mask their unease was evident. The human caregivers, however, approached the task with quiet resolve. They didn't just see fragile alien young, they saw lives depending on them, an unspoken promise to ensure their survival. From the moment the first cub was cradled in human arms, it was clear that the bond forming was unlike anything either species had experienced before. The habitats, carefully engineered to replicate the environment of Korr, became sanctuaries of safety and growth. Each was a marvel of human ingenuity, designed not only to keep the offspring alive but to help them thrive. Humans monitored every detail, adjusting temperature, air composition, and nutrient delivery with precision. Yet what truly set them apart was their personal touch. Caregivers spoke to the young in soft, soothing tones, even though the Varkaan language was incomprehensible to them. They gently comforted the cubs when they were distressed, stroking their soft scales with careful hands. To an outsider, these gestures might have seemed insignificant, but to the Varkaan parents watching from a distance, they were astonishing. One particular moment stood out. A young cub, separated from its group during the transfer, had begun to cry out, its high-pitched wails a sound that even hardened Varkaan found distressing. A human caregiver approached, kneeling beside the cub. Instead of using technology or tools, they simply wrapped the small creature in a thermal blanket and held it close, humming softly. The cub calmed almost immediately, its cries subsiding into quiet coos. The Varkaan observing the scene were stunned. To them, survival was an equation of strength and efficiency. Yet here was a human demonstrating a strength they couldn't quantify, one rooted in tenderness and connection. Over time, the results spoke for themselves. The young began to flourish under human care, their once faltering development stabilizing. Cubs that had been weak and lethargic became active and curious, exploring their habitats with growing confidence. Humans didn't just keep them alive, they gave them a chance to grow in a way the Varkaan had never seen before. The parents, still cautious, found themselves drawn to these moments of care. They began to interact with the human caregivers, not as equals but as cautious collaborators. Questions were asked, observations shared. Slowly, a bridge was forming, a fragile yet undeniable connection between two species that had nothing in common except a shared desire to protect the young. What had started as a gamble born of desperation was becoming something more. For the Varkaan, it was a lesson they couldn't ignore. There was a strength in humanity that defied logic, a strength that lay not in power or dominance but in their capacity to nurture, protect, and connect. The Varkaan were a species forged by survival. Their world, known as Korr, was a tempest of jagged peaks, acid rains, and predators that could eviscerate a careless wanderer in seconds. Yet, none were more feared than the Varkaan themselves. Towering beings with onyx-black scales, eyes like molten gold, and claws sharp enough to rend steel, they were the undisputed apex predators of their environment. Survival wasn't just instinct for them, it was doctrine. Every decision, every advancement, every alliance or betrayal revolved around one unshakable principle: preserve the species at all costs. Their young were their greatest vulnerability. While adult Varkaan were nearly invincible, their offspring were fragile, their scales soft, their senses dulled. The early stages of life were treacherous, and even in normal conditions, the mortality rate was high. Korr's unforgiving environment compounded the struggle, but the Varkaan adapted, constructing nesting sanctuaries in the planet's safest regions. These sanctuaries, however, were no match for what had come to be known as the Korr nesting crisis. A series of tectonic shifts, triggered by the planet's unstable core, unleashed a cascade of disasters. Toxic gases seeped into the sanctuaries, the ground split open to swallow nests whole, and the skies filled with corrosive storms that even Varkaan technology struggled to withstand. The species faced a grim reality. Their young would not survive another season. This was no mere setback. It was an existential threat. The Varkaan Council convened, their voices, deep and resonant, echoing through the great chamber. Here, surrounded by symbols of their victories and resilience, they debated the unthinkable. Outsiders had never been trusted. Other species, weaker and often deceitful, had tried to undermine the Varkaan at every turn. Alliances were rare, and trust was rarer still. Yet now, with their young at risk of extinction, the Council faced an unprecedented dilemma: seek help from beyond their world. Among the options presented, one stood out as both absurd and audacious. The humans. Humans, as a species, were unimpressive by Varkaan standards. They were small, soft-skinned, and lacked the physical attributes of true predators. Yet, whispers of their peculiar resilience and boundless empathy had reached the Varkaan. Humans had been known to care for creatures far removed from their own kind, raising orphaned predators, nursing wounded beasts, and even risking their lives for animals they could never truly understand. Still, the idea of entrusting their vulnerable offspring to such fragile beings bordered on lunacy. The council was divided. One elder growled, "Would you place our young in the hands of prey?" Another countered, "They may be prey, but they succeed where even predators fail." The debate raged for days, but desperation is a powerful motivator. With no alternatives and time running out, the council made a fateful decision. They would approach humanity, not as equals, for such a notion was laughable, but as a desperate species gambling everything on the unproven strengths of an unlikely ally.